You are living an ordinary day right now. You have your phone in your hand, the refrigerator in your house is running silently. The Earth continues to rotate in a perfect rhythm on an invisible electromagnetic web. However, even if you raised your head and looked at the sky, you could not see what just happened 150 million kilometers away. On the surface of the Sun, a massive explosion occurred, equal to the power of tens of billions of nuclear bombs. According to the laws of physics, it takes only 8 minutes for this deadly magnetic wave, traveling at the speed of light, to reach our world. It took humanity 3 minutes to notice this disaster through satellite sensors in space. We have only 5 minutes left. 5 minutes later, human history will end, not biologically, but technologically. The modern civilization we built in 100 years will return to the 19th century in seconds. This is not a Hollywood script. This is the most realistic nightmare that astrophysicists fear most and that our star can do to us. Welcome to the last 5 minutes before the solar storm hits our world, and the dark 24 hours that follow. 4 minutes left until the collision. Giant screens in space agencies suddenly turn red. Scientists see a massive plasma cloud torn from the sun, a coronal mass ejection, heading directly toward Earth. The word, panic, is not enough to describe the horror in that room. There is no time to warn governments, shut down power lines, or inform the public. Because even writing a bureaucratic warning message and sending it to televisions takes longer than 5 minutes. Billions of people outside are drinking their coffee, scrolling through social media, and taking the subway to work. They are completely unaware that they are walking toward their own end. 1 minute left until the collision. Satellites in the uppermost layers of the atmosphere take the first hit. GPS satellites, communication systems, and military radar networks are silently scorched. Astronauts on the International Space Station hide in the deepest, lead-lined corner of the station to protect themselves from the radiation storm. And ground zero. The wave hits the atmosphere. Do not expect a massive fireball like meteors, explosions, or tremors that tear down buildings. A solar storm is completely silent and invisible. The only thing you will see is the sky suddenly turning neon green, purple, and red. Massive auroras appear during the daytime, even at the equator. The sky looks like it is on fire. A tremendously beautiful but extremely deadly sight. And then that terrible moment comes. The power grids collapse. This massive magnetic tsunami from the sun stretches Earth's protective magnetic field like a rubber band and releases it violently. According to the law of induction in physics, this massive magnetic change suddenly creates direct currents of billions of volts in long power transmission lines on the ground. Those giant main transformers that feed cities cannot withstand this abnormal load and catch fire and explode one after another. Copper cables melt. That never-ending background hum of the city is suddenly replaced by a deadly silence. Half of the world is plunged into pitch darkness within seconds. However, the real disaster is not happening above ground, but underground and at the bottom of the oceans. You are wondering if the internet will collapse, aren't you? Unfortunately, the answer is yes. The internet disappears in seconds. Undersea fiber optic cables connecting continents are not directly damaged because they are made of glass. However, the electronic repeaters that power these long cables and are placed every 50 kilometers are instantly scorched. Global data flow stops. Short circuits begin in the server chips of giant data centers housing Amazon, Google, and international banking systems. Those digital millions in your bank account, your 10 years of family photos uploaded to the cloud, and your social media accounts. They all turn into digital smoke and mix into the atmosphere. That piece of glass you are looking at on the screen is now just a black brick. The first hour passes. People are not yet aware of the global scale of the disaster. Most people think it's just a local power outage in the neighborhood. They reach for their phones, but there is no network because the base stations are burned. Wireless networks are not visible because modems are silent. Those who turn on their radios to get information hear only an endless white hiss. When communication breaks down, the perception of security in our brains collapses. Chaos on the roads begins in seconds. Traffic lights go out. Hundreds of thousands of vehicles suddenly stop in the middle of highways because the electronic control units of electric vehicles and modern cars are burned as if thrown into a microwave. Giant pile-ups become inevitable. Planes in the sky will not hang in the air and suddenly crash to the ground. Their mechanical systems and jet engines may continue to work. However, as their communication with all control towers on the ground, GPS satellites, and weather radars is completely cut off, they begin to fly blind. Tens of thousands of pilots flying at night do not know where to land the giant metal birds because the navigation and runway lights at the airports are not on. The most terrifying minutes are experienced in hospitals. For patients in operating rooms and connected to life support units, diesel generators must kick in. However, the ignition chips of the generators do not work because they were also damaged by the storm. Thousands of lives that modern medicine connected to machines end silently within those first 10 minutes when the generators fall silent. 12 hours after the disaster, the first night begins. And this is the darkest night humanity has seen in the last 130 years. There are no streetlights, no television lights leaking from house windows. There are only those eerily beautiful neon auroras still glowing in the sky. The truth is, a solar storm does no direct harm to the human body. Our flesh does not scorch, our bones do not melt, we do not experience radiation poisoning. We are biologically perfectly alive. However, our species is a disabled species that has become completely dependent on technology to survive. In the freezing silence of the first night, the real truth slowly begins to seep into people's minds. Help will not come, because there is no communication network to call for help. No police. No fire department. The doors of the markets remained closed because they were electronically locked. Those whose glass was broken and opened began to be looted by the panicking public within hours. Because the water networks of the cities work with giant electric pumps, water stops flowing from the taps. Toilets do not work. Modern man turns into a primitive hunter looking for water and food in the middle of cities, inside giant piles of concrete. Will humanity be completely wiped out? Will we experience a global extinction? No. Biological life will continue. The world will continue to turn, and the rain will continue to fall. However, that comfortable civilization as we know it will experience a great collapse. The stopping of supply chains, the disappearance of the internet, and the resetting of the financial system instantly throw the world back to the brutal conditions of the 19th century. Giant agricultural machines on farms do not work. Logistics networks carrying food to markets are paralyzed. At the end of 24 hours, people painfully realize that the credit cards in their pockets or their millions of liras in the bank mean nothing. Digital money is burned and will never come back. Now, the richest person in the world is not the one with a crowded bank account, but the one who has an extra bottle of clean water and the power to protect themselves. The rules of society turn into a primitive law of survival that those who hold power will rewrite. Cities become uninhabitable concrete deserts. People start a forced migration in masses toward rural areas to find water and food. It will take decades, not months, to wake up from this nightmare and rebuild civilization. Because those giant city transformers that burned and the satellite systems in space do not have backups waiting in reserve. Giant factories need to work at full capacity to produce and replace those giant power transmission centers. However, electricity is needed for the factories to work. And to produce electricity, those burned transformers are needed. This is a terrible and inextricable vicious cycle. The sun pulled the plug on this digital prison we created for ourselves in a single move. In just 24 hours, the vast humanity that conquered space, created artificial intelligence, and turned the world into a digital village falls to its knees. It turns out how great an illusion the technological victory we thought we won against nature and the universe was. We are still extremely fragile beings at the mercy of that giant burning nuclear sphere in the depths of space. What I am telling you is not just a theoretical possibility. In 1859, a giant solar storm of exactly the magnitude I described hit the world. In the scientific world, this is called the Carrington Event. However, since the most advanced technology humanity had at that time consisted only of telegraph lines, there was no great destruction other than some telegraph operators suffering electric shocks and papers catching fire. In fact, the sky was so bright that day that people could read newspapers at night. However, today the world does not work with telegraphs. Every second of our lives, every breath we take is connected to a digital grid. According to astrophysicists, it is certain that such a giant storm will hit the world again. The question is not whether it will happen, but when it will happen. Maybe in 100 years, maybe next month, maybe tomorrow morning while you are going to work. That insidious explosion on the surface of the sun can happen at any moment. If that expected day comes, that latest model smartphone in your pocket will turn into just a black and useless piece of glass. The internet will be carved into history books, or cave walls, as a legend. And humanity will start watching the stars in the sky, sitting in the dark again, just as it was thousands of years ago. The truth is, no matter how much technology advances, we are always just a moment away from starting over from scratch in the face of nature. So, are you ready to survive in this new world when the plugs are pulled forever and your digital identity is erased? Or have you already handed over your survival skills to the internet? Share your ideas with us in the comments. Don't forget to turn on notifications and subscribe to the channel before the darkness falls.